This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nita Hone, and it is Friday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. While this series primarily focuses on ranking cards based on their performance at Magic's highest competitive level, from time to time I like to do a list that is subjective rather than objective, and that's what I'm doing today. Theros Beyond Death is a set that is based on classical Greek history and culture, and there are several cards within the set directly inspired by actual Greek myths. In this video, I'm going to talk about the 10 of these that I think have the best designs in terms of flavor. This isn't an exhaustive list of all those references, just my picks for the 10 that are the most fun flavor-wise. If you don't know, in my non-magic life, I'm a history professor, and while my area of expertise is medieval Europe, I teach European history survey courses that go all the way back to the beginning of civilization, and I of course cover classical Greece in those courses, so this is one of those MTG Top 10s where I can combine my two professions. Alright, let's get started. At number 10, I have the first Eroan Games, which are of course a reference to the Olympic Games, which, according to Greek tradition, began in 776 BCE. Greece was divided into small city-states, and many of them came together and competed to see who the greatest athletes were during a festival called the Olympics. The first Eroan Games does a good job of embodying an athlete's journey from the beginning of training until they find success, and the art on the card does a good job of representing this too, using a style that is similar to the Grecian urns we have today that depict the Olympics. The athlete here starts out as a 1/1 creature, but then with some training manages to become a 4/4. Next, the athlete competes in their event, which here appears to be the javelin, though wrestling is also depicted, but both of those are events from the ancient Olympics that are still present in our Olympics of today. And then finally, after achieving that victory, the athlete is awarded with a gold medal. Now, it is worth noting that, at least in actual ancient Greece, athletes were not awarded medals. Instead, they were given laurel crowns to wear to show their accomplishment. So while that part may not be the most flavorful in the terms of the actual ancient Olympics, I think that's okay because it would have been a lot harder to represent laurel crowns in Magic than it is a gold medal. At number 9, I have another saga, the Iliad War. This one is a reference to the events of the Iliad, an epic poem by Homer. This poem recounts the events of the semi-historical Trojan War, which was fought between the Mycenaeans, the group of people who we think of today as the precursors to the classical Greeks, and the Trojans, a group of people whose city was located in Asia Minor. The war is started because the son of the ruler of Troy kidnaps Helen, who is the wife of one of the rulers in Greece. And kidnap might be a strong word. More accurately, they ran away together. This led to the Mycenaeans declaring war on the Trojans, and eventually the Greeks invaded Troy and won the war. The different chapters of this saga tell the story through both the effects and the art on the card. Chapter 1 depicts the analogs of Helen of Troy and Paris, her suitor, apparently being pursued by someone, and the effect involves taking control of a creature. Chapter 2 seems to depict people on a warpath, and the effect seems to back that up by making creatures attack. And finally, Chapter 3 shows the ultimate victory and all of the deaths from the Trojan War by having a bunch of creatures get killed. At number 8, I have Wings of Hubris. This one references one of the more famous Greek stories, that of Icarus. In this story, a young man named Icarus is imprisoned with his father, Daedalus, who is a great craftsman who built a magnificent labyrinth on the island of Crete. And actually, there is a card that is inspired by Daedalus too in this set, Dalichos, but I thought the Wings of Hubris did a better job of expressing this story in terms of the effect. But anyway, they're imprisoned, but Icarus' father, Daedalus, constructs wings out of wax and feathers, and they plan to fly away from the tower they are imprisoned in by using them. The wings end up working, but the hubris of Icarus leads to his death. Daedalus warns Icarus that he should not fly too close to the sun, or the wings might melt, but Icarus' hubris causes him to ignore this, and in the end his wings melt, as his father predicted, and Icarus falls to his death. Hubris is a major idea in Greek culture, with many characters throughout Greek literature expressing a feeling of excessive arrogance or pride, receiving punishments, with Icarus just one of many. Wings of Hubris has this on full display, with the wings capable of allowing a creature to have flying, and it's capable of making them unblockable too, but the price for being unblockable here is the ultimate one. You lose both the wings and the creature at the end of the turn. Unblockability here is the stand-in for Icarus flying too close to the sun. At number 7, I have Allure of the Unknown, which is inspired by the story commonly called Pandora's Box. Most cultures have a story that expresses that evil and bad things were not always part of our world, but a mistake made by an early human screwed everything up and caused that to happen. In Greek mythology, that story is Pandora's box. Pandora was the first human ever created by the gods, and her name literally means all gifts because the gods gave her many gifts. She was then given to a titan, Epimetheus, to marry, and the gods sent her with a jar. It's not actually a box, despite the popular name, and the contents of this jar are unknown. Pandora wants to open the jar, but Epimetheus didn't want her to. Eventually, she sneaks off and opens the jar, which it turns out contained all the bad stuff in the world. Allure of the Unknown's very name expresses Pandora's urge to open the jar, and the effect does a good job of expressing the story, since, while you get some gifts from it, you also have to deal with one very bad unknown thing, and that's the free spell you just handed to your opponent. The flavor text on the card names the character Pantor, just in case you had any doubts that it referenced Pandora. At number 6, I have Mirror Shield, which references the Greek hero Perseus and the special weapon he used to defeat a Gorgon named Medusa. Medusa's gaze could turn anyone who looked at her into stone. Athena gave Perseus a polished shield, and he used that shield to reflect Medusa's gaze back onto her, turning her into stone instead. Mirror Shield's toughness boost and the granting of hexproof reflect the power of the shield, but the part that really sells the flavor is the fact that Death Touch creatures immediately die when coming into contact with the Mirror Shield, and Death Touch is a pretty close facsimile to Medusa's abilities in the myth. At number 5, I have Impending Doom, which references another famous weapon in Greek culture, commonly called the Sword of Damocles. In the story, Damocles was a member of the court of one of the Greek city-states, Syracuse. He was basically an insufferable sycophant, always exclaiming how the king of Syracuse was a great man with amazing power as the king. The king grew tired of his behavior, and he offered to make him the king for a day. Damocles proudly got on the throne as king, but a sword was suspended directly above the throne and held there only by a very thin horsehair. The king of Syracuse did this to symbolize how danger comes hand in hand with the power of becoming king. Damocles became uncomfortable and decided that putting his life in such danger was not worth being king, so he surrenders the throne. The art on Impending Doom depicts a sword suspended by a rope over a man's head, and the effect also expresses the story quite well. You might get something out of being king, in this case +3/+3, but look out, everyone is out to get you, and that's expressed by forcing the creature to attack every turn, and eventually punishing the creature's controller when the danger finally results in the inevitable death of the enchanted creature. At number 4, I have 2 cards, Labyrinth of Scophos and Scophos Maze Warden. These 2 cards are inspired by the Labyrinth of Daedalus. Yes, the same Daedalus I mentioned earlier, who built the wings that he and Icarus used to escape captivity. He also built an amazing labyrinth, an inescapable maze for the king of Crete, a man named Minos. The purpose of the maze was to hold a frightening creature, the Minotaur, who would eventually find you and kill you. The Labyrinth of Scophos represents getting lost within it by forcing a creature to leave combat, and the Scophos Maze Warden represents the Minotaur, obviously enough, in that if you get trapped in that labyrinth, he's going to find you and take you down, or in this case, fight the creature who gets stuck in it. At number 3, I have Haktos, the Unscarred, who's a stand-in for Achilles. Our second card that gets its inspiration from the Iliad. In that particular epic poem, Achilles is the greatest fighter among all of the Mycenaeans, famed for never being wounded in battle and winning every single fight he ever got into. He is a complicated character, to say the least, and not the most heroic guy ever, despite many great feats. In the end, he's killed by an arrow to his heel. Now, the whole idea that Achilles was invulnerable everywhere but his heel can't actually be found in the Iliad. It's something that is added to his legend much later, during the Roman period, and that's mostly what Haktos here is referencing, that invulnerability. The dude only has 1 toughness, but he has protection from just about everything. However, the one thing he doesn't have protection from is going to be able to kill him, since he's only got that 1 toughness. That's a pretty flavorful representation of the idea that Achilles is invulnerable everywhere but his heel. At number 2, I have Bronze-Hide Lion, which references the Nemean lion, a creature who was slain by the great Greek hero and later god, Heracles, more commonly called Hercules, which is the way the Romans wrote his name. Hercules is a much more tragic character than the Disney movie would have you believe. He was the son of Zeus and a human woman, and Zeus's wife Hera hated Hercules. She drove him insane, and in his insanity, she drove him to kill his children and his wife. Once he was free from madness, he was required to do several labors that would allow him to be forgiven for his actions. One of his many labors was to kill the Nemean lion, which had killed countless people. It had fur that was completely impenetrable by human weapons. Hercules got around this little problem by strangling the lion with his bare hands. Then he skinned the animal and wore its pelt as armor. The bronze-hide lion's indestructibility and the fact that it comes back as an aura that can grant indestructibility does a good job of representing the Nemean lion's abilities. And at number 1, I have Illyrios Enraptured, which references the Greek mythological figure Narcissus, the figure from which we get the word narcissism. He was supposed to be an incredibly attractive man, but also a pretty big jerk who was full of himself and not nice to anybody. He eventually gets punished for this by Nemesis, the goddess of retribution. One day, Narcissus is hunting and sees his own reflection. He becomes, enraptured with his own reflection and never wants to look away from it. He doesn't leave the reflection to eat or rest or anything else, and eventually he just wastes away, transforming into a flower. Illyrios does an amazing job of capturing this not only with the art, but with the way the card works. Illyrios makes a reflection token, which is a perfect reflection of Illyrios in terms of power and toughness. Then, as long as that reflection is in play, Illyrios isn't capable of really doing anything. He's too busy staring at his own reflection to bother untapping. I like this particular design because it is incredibly simple, but does a great job of expressing pretty much everything you need to know about Illyrios and Narcissus. Well, those are my picks for the most flavorful references to Greek mythology and culture in Theros Beyond Death. Are there any I left out that you really like? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you see future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on the over 240 I've already done, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.